One. Hey everyone, my name is Jeremy Yu. Today I'm going to be presenting my final project on the game of chess, and more specifically, I researched the evolution of the modern athlete through the game of chess. And my interest in this really stems from a couple years ago. I came here to St. Louis as a freshman, and I found that there's a lot of chess being played in St. Louis, and there's a local chess club if you didn't know, and there's also a lot of big high-profile tournaments that go through that chess club. And so I'm also just a big sports fan, and I love studying and talking about sports. And so that this kind of fits into that category. So just to jump in, here's an image of the World Chess Championship that happened in November between Magnus Carlsen here on the right. Here on the left, and Fabiano Caruana of the United States on the right. And so just a couple storylines about this event. These storylines frame the players as athletes, and so the first storyline is just their their skill gap. On the ratings list, they're actually 3 points apart. So this is kind of like a negligible difference to a lot of their peers. They are the two best players in the world. On the ratings, they're actually 1 and 2. Secondly, there was a lot of news articles. This one's from the New York Times that framed Caruana as kind of the next Bobby Fischer. And so, if you didn't know who Bobby Fischer was, he was the last U.S. Player to actually challenge for the World Chess Championship title. And so, there's these parallels between 46 years ago and now. That kind of hyped the match up. And lastly, there's been a lot of articles that have come out of actual sports media outlets. So this one's from ESPN, and these articles actually do frame the players very intentionally as athletes. And so thinking about all these things got me thinking about this question of, okay, well, if we consider professional chess athletes to be, consider professional chess players to be athletes, how does our definition of the modern athlete change? Does it change at all? So what I did was I started looking at the history of chess, and that's where I began. And what I found was that first chess originated in India. This is just kind of some background. It originated in India, eventually went to the Persian Empire, and eventually it reached Europe, where it started developing the rules that we normally associate with chess today. And so in my research, I really discovered a certain argument. And so this argument has a couple of parts. First, that chess players were hobbyists. They played the game for fun. But later on, they added on this layer of, well, chess players actually became competitors. They played it competitively. And so for this idea of chess tournaments, right, this London 1851 was the first international chess tournament that occurred. And lastly, that chess players added on another layer of being representatives of their country, of the sports itself. So I'm going to explore each of these parts in depth. First, pretty straightforward, that chess players were hobbyists before the 1800s. The game, as it arrived in Europe, was played mostly by aristocrats, people who had money, had the time to actually play such a game. And so, yeah, that makes sense. It fits historically, and it also makes sense with the time. Secondly, chess players from the 1800s to the mid-20th century were competitors. And so they played the game for fun, but also the arrival of tournament play and the arrival of, let's say, the first official World Chess Championship really solidified the game as an actual sport, and really solidified the game as possibly a profession for some people. So some other things that helped it become a competitive sort of sport was the London Rules. So London Rules actually, they formalized the guidelines that surrounded the World Chess Championship, gave it more reward money, gave it more prize money, also set up some formal gameplay rules, just like any other sport here today. A lot of rules need to be in place for how to play the game, for how to go about your business as, when you're not in the game per se. So these kinds of rules set up and allowed the sport to be further formalized and further seen as a profession. And lastly, the World Chess Federation was set up in 1924. This federation helped set up the World Chess Championship. Before you would have to actually challenge for the World Chess Championship by coming up with a sum of money, but this federation actually helped set up a cycle through which players could actually qualify to be a challenger to the champion. Lastly, in my historical research, I found that chess players from the mid-20th century onwards have been treated as representatives. And so I looked at this specifically through the lens of Bobby Fischer. As I mentioned before, he was a U.S. Grandmaster, a chess Grandmaster who won the world title in 1972, and it just so happened that his reign at the top of the game coincided with the peak of the Cold War. And so his victory really aligned with kind of a lot of political overtones and a lot of just having this moral victory of not just winning a game on the board, but actually scoring something for his own country. And so his role, he kind of became an icon during this time. But later on in life, he actually developed a lot of anti-American and anti-Semitic views that really just basically didn't align with the values of the U.S. Chess Federation. And so the USCF actually cut him off at some point. And he had to live in exile for a long time. His passport was revoked. So there's this idea that as a chess player, you are representing your country. You're representing the game itself. And if you reflect badly on it, certain consequences might come about. So taking these three roles, I kind of looked at, well, how does the role of athlete, right? If we consider chess players to be athletes, how does this role of athlete build on the roles that chess players have occupied in history? So first, I found that basically it relates to all these previous roles through technology. And so specifically for hobbyists, right, for chess as a hobby, professionals still play chess as a hobby today, and they mainly do this through online sites. This idea that you can play online has produced this kind of virtual intimacy, what I've termed a virtual intimacy between players in the top 20, let's say, and just regular players like me who are not very good at chess. So you can actually go ahead and play, even Magnus Carlsen here, who actually went on a site called lichess.org and played tournaments with people who were pretty good, but not up to his level, obviously. And so there's this idea of you're virtually intimate. You're able to play these players, and this isn't really seen in mainstream sports today. So here's another example where Peter Svidler, he's the 19th ranked grandmaster in the world, and he has on his website Chess24, he actually sets up times specifically where he will play normal users on his site. And lastly, here's a GIF of Kevin Bourdie. He actually plays Magnus. He draws him, he ties him, and he jumps up in celebration. And so this kind of thing where there's an opportunity to have great games against the people you see as at the top of the game is so exciting. Secondly, fans follow pros as competitors. So the second role of competitors is able to be explored through videos and online news. And so fans can actually follow the competitors as they play people of the same caliber as themselves through streams. And so we look at here's an example of a stream on Chess24. You can see the board here. The chess engine gives best moves down here. There's a chat for for people who are just tuning in, and you can click on this video to view the live stream. So here's some videos from the press conferences from this recent World Chess Championship match, so you can actually go after if you've missed the games and watch the press conferences. Also, a lot of online news that was produced by sports websites, by normal news outlets that helped people catch up on the games. And so this idea that through technology, you can actually catch up on things you've missed, you can catch up on competitions between top chess players. This doesn't really change our idea of what a modern athlete is. This simply tells us that viewership is really important for the modern athlete, and this is no different for chess players. And lastly, chess pros, we know them as representatives of their country and of the game itself, right? And so this idea, when combined with social media, actually produces a certain scrutiny that chess pros are put under. And so, for example, in this case, Magnus Carlsen, in the last game of the World Chess Championship, he actually offered a draw in a better position to Fabiano Caruana. And immediately on social media, people jumped on him. So, for example, this guy said that a host of potential future sponsors would walk away from the game of chess because of this draw offer that the world champion offered to his opponent on the highest of levels. And so at this point, the match was still tied, so a lot of people wanted him to continue playing. And also Fabiano Caruana, he actually lives here in St. Louis, and so he represents not only the United States, but he also represents the U.S. Chess Federation, the St. Louis Chess Club, and so he got congratulations. He represented these organizations well with his play at the World Championship, even though he didn't win. This also doesn't really change our definition of the modern athlete. I found that basically it supports everything that we've seen from mainstream sports too. When mainstream sports athletes do something wrong, or when something on on social media is said incorrectly, they instantly get burned for it. They instantly get they instantly get rebuked for it sometimes. So this doesn't really change our definition of the modern athlete as well. So just to conclude, I found these three things in my research, that the definition of the modern athlete has now included this kind of virtual intimacy when we think of chess players. This virtual intimacy that involves interactions between the top players and fans that is on a level playing field, and this isn't seen in other mainstream sports. The two parts that actually confirm the modern athlete definition are this need for viewership, right? That chess players, just like any other sports athletes, need viewership to be able to be known, to be familiar to the public, and also that when combined with technology, that their roles as representatives have come under scrutiny. And so this also isn't any different from modern athletes in other sports who are scrutinized through social media very quickly. And so just lastly, I wanted to finish up by encouraging you guys to go visit the World Chess Scholastic Center here in St. Louis. I think it's in the Central West End. It is a really nice place. It's a really cool place. It has a Chess Hall of Fame. And lastly, just this image of Magnus Carlsen, the World Chess Champion, who ran around Francis Field during the summer when he was here for a tournament. So yeah, we were physically very close to him. I was very physically close to him since I was here during the summer. So yeah, thanks for listening. Are there any questions?